Hello everyone, welcome to this week's Astrology News Report, an alternate view of world events as seen through the lens of Vedic astrology, presented by yours truly, Ron Berger. Today is November 16th, 2014. So let's take a look at the week that was, and how the planets' positions in the zodiac matched up with the past week's events. Mars is the planet of combat. Sagittarius is the sign of beliefs. Mars in Sagittarius means fighting for your beliefs. Having postponed his action on immigration until after the election, the president says he is now going to make his move via executive order. Obama vows he will single-handedly remedy some of the shortcomings of the U.S. immigration law. The president also took an unequivocal stance on net neutrality and restated his reservations about approving the Keystone Pipeline project. This drew an immediate response from the Republican leadership. They are outraged. Of course, the Mars in Sagittarius energy pattern is available to them too. A showdown between Obama and the GOP appears to be a certainty. Pundits are calling it the lame duck offensive. Mitch McConnell says the president acting independently would be like waving a red flag in front of the bull, a colorful metaphor that has the Congress in the role of the bull, a dumb animal that goes ballistic when a bit of red cloth blocks its way. Let's note, too, that Rahu is in the process of transiting over the USA natal Saturn in the 10th house of the USA chart. Saturn is the planet of the established order, the current reality structure. Rahu is an agent of transformation and obsession. The 10th house is the house of the leader, in other words, President Obama. So we get obsession with control by the leadership, simultaneous with transformation of the established order. Things are going to get more interesting in a couple of weeks when Mars enters Capricorn. That will mean Mars transiting in President Obama's first house, a transit that definitely indicates aggressive action and a willingness to take on opponents. Note, too, how Mars will be opposite Mr. Obama's natal sun, the planet of power and authority, and Jupiter, transiting in his 7th house, sends its aspect to Mars in his ascendant. That's a combination that gives confidence and encourages assertiveness and taking risks. The Mars conjunct Pluto, Mars square Uranus combination last week set up an energy pattern for violent, unexpected events. One horrific example was last Monday's suicide bombing at a school in Potiskum, Nigeria, which killed 48 students and teachers. The group Boko Haram is blamed for the attack, which fits their MO since they espouse strong objections to Western education. And in Mexico, anger over the abduction and murder of 43 college students boiled over into violent protests. Acapulco International Airport was shut down, dozens were hurt, the door of the ceremonial palace in Mexico City was set afire. Mars square to Uranus has manifested as the strong desire of the people for a transformation of the situation in Mexico, where the drug cartels are now controlling local governments. Saturn, the planet of practical realities, entered Scorpio, the sign of alliances, at the beginning of this month, creating a combination for practical alliances. And last week, Venus, the planet of agreements and appearances, joined up with Saturn in Scorpio. Leaders from all over the world met in Beijing, China, for the APEC summit, bringing together the leaders of Asian countries with the leaders of Western countries. The topic? Global trade agreements. Everybody played nice for the cameras. In matching jackets, no less. Very Venus. But behind closed doors, it was another story. A battle over resources, trade, money, and regional power. A good example of Venus, planet of appearances, harmony and agreement, conjunct Saturn, the reality check planet, both in Scorpio, the sign of secret agendas. But at least one important agreement was apparently reached. The U.S. and China agreed on a major climate change deal, marking a significant advance in climate change politics and the efforts to reverse the pollution of the Earth, something that China is interested in since it has some of the worst air pollution on the planet. Then, off to Australia for another powwow. The APEC meeting was followed by a G20 meeting in Brisbane, Australia. It's again Venus, Saturn in Scorpio. Russian President Vladimir Putin, seeking to make some sort of impression, arrived with a retinue of Russian warships, which were hanging out in international waters off Australia's northeastern coast. For this, and for his support of the separatist rebels in Ukraine, he was roundly criticized. Putin left the summit early. And last week, we had an example of what other sorts of unholy alliances this combination of Saturn and Venus in Scorpio can bring. The two rebel heavy hitters in Syria, the Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda offshoot, the Nusra Front, have reputedly agreed to bury the hatchet and instead of fighting each other, join forces against their opponents, who are namely the Western-led coalition and the Assad regime. The Venus-Saturn conjunction last week manifested in other ways. Venus is the planet of finance, and therefore currencies. Saturn represents penalties. Last week, when the two planets were conjunct, 5 of the world's largest banks, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, RBS, HSBC, and UBS, were fined $4.25 billion in total by authorities in the UK, US, and Switzerland for conspiring to manipulate global currency markets. And another manifestation of Venus, planet of value, and therefore currencies, conjunct Saturn, planet of reality, practicality, and durability. The rebel group, known as the Islamic State, says it is done with the tyrannical money system of the Western powers' paper money, and has decided to introduce its own currency, as befitting of any genuine sovereign state. ISIS says it will mint coins which will be made out of real gold and silver, just like in the old days. Simultaneous with Venus conjunct Saturn last Wednesday, November 12th, Mars was exactly square Uranus, the planet of aggression and violence, sending its challenging, conflict-prone aspect to the planet of freedom and rebellion. The Ukraine situation has heated up again. Russian forces have reportedly been pouring into eastern Ukraine to bolster the resistance against the Ukraine government, which itself has been sending more troops to the region to counter the efforts of the separatists. And as of today, Sunday, November 16th, the Sun has entered Scorpio, joining forces with Saturn, a problematic combination that puts together the planet of power and the planet of punishment. Therefore, a situation that is prone to manifest as the use of force. Okay, that'll do it for this week's Review of the Week. You can keep up with daily astrological developments and contribute your own thoughts by following me on Twitter at Astro News Report.